Hey, I'm Jay. Welcome to my booth. So, as an audiobook narrator, a really interesting thing happens in the process of making an audiobook, where, on the one hand, we work really closely with authors to make sure that the project is a success, make the idea and story come to life. But on the other hand, there's like a barrier of some sort that just mystifies a lot of aspects of the process. And a few weeks ago, I was having a conversation with one of the authors that I've worked with several times, Merritt Graves. And he's just a really cool guy, generous person. And as we were talking, I was like, this might be really cool to have a conversation on my YouTube channel if you'd be willing to do that. And I'd love to just pick your brain about how you write your books, how the ideas come to life, how you make your characters. But then Merritt, being Merritt, came back and said, that we can definitely dive into that if you want, but I'd love to be of service to the people who watch your channel, which Merritt, assume are audiobook narrators and voiceover artists. So what if we talked about how a process can be successful? What, from an author's perspective, is helpful for a narrator to provide or be aware of, and vice versa? What, from a narrator's perspective, is helpful for an author to take in mind and contribute to the collaboration, to both make sure that the project is a success, but also that it's really rewarding for both parties, because Merritt and I have had a great time working together on his books. So it's a really great conversation. I hope you enjoy it. And if you like this stuff and you find it helpful, you can click the buttons down there. That's a great and easy way to support it. Of course, being here is wonderful. And if you want to lend a little bit of extra support, you can check out the booth buddies down there. Those of you who already are booth buddies, I appreciate you all very much. And those of you who are curious about it, I look forward to you joining our ranks, as it were. The books that Merritt and I have worked on, because they're just really fantastic, and both he and I are very shy about self-promotion and talking each other up. We're very good about complimenting each other because we both think each other are really good at what they do respectively, what we do respectively. If you want to check them out, Lakes of Mars is the first one that we did together. Forever X2, a really cool story. We talk about that one a little bit in the conversation here. And then Drive A, of which we also talk about a bit in the conversation. But all three really, really fantastic books. I'll leave links for those down below if you want to check them out, and enjoy the conversation.
I'm impossible to reach now.
That's not a bad place to be. I wish that I spent more time there. Well, Merritt Graves,
Jay,
thanks for chatting with me.
thanks for having me, Jay.
I was really struck by our conversation when we linked up like a few weeks ago to just chat higher learning and such. Then in this, I loved your thoughtfulness in shifting things, because I'm like, you know what? I'd love to just pick your brain on how your writing process goes, the different books, your ideation for stories, because since we've worked together on it's 3 books, right?
Yep.
Lakes of Mars, Drive A, and Forever X2.
That's right.
Right. And I was just looking to pick, but then you said, what if we also talked about, or instead of talked about, the process of collaboration between author and narrator? And that's a fantastic idea, I think, from both perspectives, because as I was thinking about it more, I was like, I'm sure that there's authors out there trying to find narrators and not really sure what to look for, where they're going, how the process really works. So I guess in terms of your beginning your journey in both writing your books and then looking to have them translated into audiobook format, what did that process look like for you? Because I honestly have no idea what it's like from the author's perspective.
Yeah, no, I mean, it started by first going through about, I want to say like 2,000 samples on ACX and Find Away Voices, RIP Find Away Voices.
Right.
They shut that, I think they shut that down, which is really too bad. because that was one of the few, I don't know, I felt one of the better places I felt for
Hmm.
to connect the author and the narrator. But yeah, you're just going through samples, trying to yeah, like read in, like, it's tough because you want to find ideally, the narrator has stuff that's in your genre, stuff that makes it easy to picture them doing it.
Hmm.
It's always going to be like, you know, uh just an unknown quantity of, how are they going to approach my material and stuff. But I think it's really important to try to have as good as idea as you can, and be as confident as you can when you reach out and when you start working together, because if you
From
believe,
the author's
yeah,
perspective,
the
or
author believing in the narrator, because if you
mm,
you feel really good about that, it makes it so much easier to just give up control and
mm.
put it into your hands, and just be, trust that they know that they've got it.
What
Um,
kind of things were helpful for you? And I mean, uh, granted, this was our collaboration, so it feels a little weird being like, "Well, what did you think?" But what were things specifically that were helpful for you to, you know, buy into it more so, and put that, trust into the process and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, just things like, things like tone, things like just seeming to have a just good emotional understanding of the characters, being able to differentiate characters. There is something like, you know, uh, reading is really immersive, or listening is super immersive. And so someone, that kind of has that like hypnotic quality where you just
Mhm,
feel transported by their voice and can kind of just let everything else like melt away. And just like the choices that you're making in your sample. Um,
mhm.
I think that, they say a lot. Um, if you're being able to craft compelling characters in your samples, it just gives you more trust.
It's interesting because when I was thinking back, I was also thinking as to why, because I love a lot of the authors that I work with, obviously, but in terms of the books that we've worked on together, it seems really, and a lot of the books that I've worked on, to be honest, there is a sense of just like an easy meshing in a way where, from my perspective, there are some instances where it's like a little bit of effort to like lock in, but the books that I've done, and yours in particular as well, there was a sense of the world beyond the characters that I think you write really well. And like Drive A and Forever X2, I mean all of them, but because of the essence of the story and the world building in Drive A and Forever X2, there's, of course, the main through line of the plot, which and all of the different world mechanics, which we can and I would hope to get into in a bit. But a thing that I talk about a lot is in terms of character performance, there's like the words that the character says, the scenes that they inhabit, but there's also a sense of the world that they inhabit beyond that. And an example that I've been using quite frequently lately is like if I talk about uh, my home in Oregon or something like that, or if I talk about somebody that I know, an event that actually happened, there's a sense of my memory of that thing and the world that I was in there, the way the room smelled, the way, um, and in terms of the performance of that story and committing to those things, like you were saying, and the vividness of everything, there is a sense of both of that becoming easy with certain types of stories that I think just as narrators you connect with certain ones as well as others. Uh, but also the world beyond is really, really vital, I think, to what you're saying. If I were to like latch onto something specifically, does that kind of make sense?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say that, because like, I'm getting into screenwriting more.
Yeah.
Like they say in screenwriting, it's kind of like, uh, you know, it's not just it's more a document too for the director, for the cinematographer, for
Mhm.
the set designer. You want to have hooks in there that get them that paint a picture for them that something for them to like latch onto, and so you don't so you're never like telling them what to do. You're just like seeding it and
Mm.
different sensory things, and then they can take that in any direction they want. But that's so interesting that you're saying that for and it makes total sense for narration too. It's like, yes, I want to give as much create as of a vivid as picture as possible in order um you know for you to it'll be different for each person, but for you to find the things in there that you connected with it, and then it makes you want to bring out the character, because it's just all like an inspiration game. Like,
Yeah.
imagine for you, it's just like if it's just not on the page, like, and you're trying to have to like manufacture it all yourself. It should be
Mhm.
like kind of like a team effort between us. Like, I'm giving you things, and then it's funny too because like after we worked together on a book, like I when we before we started Drive A, I hadn't quite finished everything.
Mm.
I like went back I went back and I rewrote characters. I added different accents, and it's because I
Mm. I remember us talking about that a little bit.
yeah, 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 no, and, which because just, like, different, like, things that you did that I just knew you would just hit it out of the park,
Sure.
and, um, so, yeah, no, it's definitely what yeah, we're just trying to get each other, yeah, feed off the energy and stuff.
I feel similarly about that process and just reading in general though, where there are just certain books where um there is that sense of the world beyond the page in a way. I mean this one's kind of like um I don't know. I don't know if tired's the right word, but Dune comes to mind right out of the gate where it's just such an expansive world beyond the like simple story that's being told that your imagination as the reader is allowed to just expand beyond it. And that's one of the things that I find so exciting about audiobooks and books in general is beyond any other medium, it implicates the reader and the listener in both allowing and enabling that sort of expansion of imagination beyond what's actually there,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
but it's also liberating as the performer and the writer because the onus isn't on you. You can write a one-sentence thing that balloons out into, you know, a whole socioeconomic history or something like that. I can't think of an example, but that's one of the things that I find really exciting about the medium.
Yeah. Yeah, but, like, it's, um it's tricky too because I don't know, sometimes I feel like I'm, like, too out there, and
Sure, why?
no, no, well, just like, like, different world building elements, like, they some of them like, take a leap, um, and so, like, that's another thing what, like, I appreciated, what you brought was, you know if you are, creating a building element that involves like a lot of like investment or something like you think, oh, you're kind of on the fence about,
Mhm.
you know, it
You the author?
yeah, well, then the reader too. Um,
Mm,
then it really, becomes I have to try as the author to try to sell it, hard, in order to make it, connect too. Because if and then that's another thing too with the narrator, because if something sounds pretty like if something could be ridiculous, right? Presented just on face,
mhm,
plot element. This sounds silly. This is absurd. Or this would never work. Um, but if you explain it well enough, and then you just come in, just complete buy-in by the narrator, like it's amazing. So, where something that could be like that all of a sudden is just inevitable. It's part of
mm,
the story. And the reader doesn't question it. And that's kind of like, everyone's kind of holding their hands together and jumping and
mhm,
and creating kind of creating this spell. Um,
mm.
this with we're all gonna, kind of dissolve into this world together. But at no point, can you be like, um, I guess like, you know, questioning it or holding back, and like I think that involves a lot of that's got to be tricky for you sometimes as a narrator if you're not there yourself with
Yeah.
material. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
and it's requiring you to maybe like be vulnerable or like exposed
Yeah.
or like something that you're like kind of iffy on and like I how do you I don't know how do you psych yourself up and when you're not psyched.
That's a great question. It can be hard because I've done some books that I, in all honesty, probably should have just said, "I'm not right for this," and passed on them. Um, so part of it is pretty simply that it's just the job. So it's your job as an actor, as a performer, to invest in things full bore, even if it's something where you're like, I don't know about this." And that's part of the, craftsmanship of it rather than, like, the artistry. Because when I was younger and newer as an actor, I would need, like, reasons why things were happening, and I would need the director. There's one example, I was in a play where, it was, like, taking place and there was a play adaptation of The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay,
Oh,
and, eh, for those who don't know, part of that story, circles around, um, a Jewish family leaving, Europe at the, cresting of World War I and the rise of Nazi Germany, and they come to New York, and so there we were depicting in motion the Jewish exodus in a way. And I was like, "I need to know, like, why I'm doing this because the director just had us walking in a circle,
okay.
and I was like, "If I know, like, specifically where I'm going, what I'm doing here, I can do I could do it better if you give me specifics."
Yeah.
And while that's true, it's not necessarily the director's job to fill in the gaps for me. It's my job as the actor to just buy in. So even if she just said, "You guys are gonna walk in a circle for 45 minutes," I just need to go, "Okay," and do it to the best of my ability with full commitment. And if I don't have a reason, I have, like, 2 options. 1, I can lament the fact that it's silly I'm walking in a circle and I have no reason to do so, or I can reinvest my energy in figuring out a reason for myself. And even if it's wrong, even if it's not what the director has in mind, uh, it will have the same end result. And at I think beyond all of it, to the audience, between the 2, there's probably a negligible, if any, difference. So,
If
um,
if you have
part y
specific or no.
yeah, part of it is just getting over yourself as a performer and doing your job, I think, in many ways. And, the better you can manufacture things where there isn't something, then, the better you will be at your job in general. That said, some material makes it much easier to fly with than others, um, which is really, really the rewarding stuff. Yeah. Do you find can you, because in terms of, like, the samples you were listening to and things like that, when you were looking for narrators for your work, was there specific things or elements, or is it, because you had said it was somewhat ineffable, but is there something specific that you would key into? And not even if it was just me, but as you were, like, shortening down the list of potentials for yourself, if there was, like, in that realm too, maybe the taking the leap. Are there specific things where you're like, "Oh, this person can commit to stuff in ways that is helpful?"
Sure. I mean, I guess a lot of it is like kind of instinct and gut because you're such a neophyte to doing it
Mhm.
on the first. time, and so it's more of like, kind of like somewhat it's the timbre, the register, somewhat matching the atmosphere
Gotcha.
of the book. I think a, a big part of it, just because like you don't want, at the same time, you want it to be interesting. You want there to be some um, kind of like, cohesion. I mean, it's like a casting director. You're casting
Sure.
a part, and
Did you go in with something in mind, or were you just kind of like, "I'm gonna cast the net wide," and then as things were like, "Ooh, that feels like the right direction," you narrowed it down?
yeah, yeah. I guess it's one of those things where I feel like it's like a almost a 90-10 thing where,
Mm,
90% you can, immediately just that's not quite right. And then the 10% you dig into more, and, certain voices will be, it's it is it's tough to, I guess, exactly. I mean, I think this is, this gets into another point, because
mm,
oftentimes the author, you know, I think they know the direction, but and they might think they know exactly
mm,
how, oh, I want this to sound like this. This character is this way. This character is that way. And then when their dynamic is like that, and they have that in their head, and then they think, that's the way it's got to be.
right.
And then it's like it's one of those things where, I feel like there's very few authors who can write, but can also produce an audiobook, and
Mm,
know, and have a better idea of the choices that the narrator is making than the narrator. Like,
mm,
I feel like there's like that's not like an overlap that necessarily happens, very often.
mhm.
Those are kind of like independent axes, and like orthogonal and stuff, and like um and so that again, that was important to me, I guess, is just to like narrowing it down, and just kind of like um feeling
Did
comfortable enough that when I hand it over, that I'm not gonna be, pestering you or bugging you, or like,
Was that effortful for you? Like, did you have to force yourself to release that?
oh, yeah, well, okay,
And I
I'm
guess part 2, was that okay for you afterwards? Or was it a struggle after you got some samples back? Were you like, "Ooh, I really wanna steer things?"
yeah, well, it's interesting, because like the first listen through, I was like, "Oh, no, that's not that's not how this character sounds."
Sure.
And then, oh, and like, and so yeah, my first instincts were like, "Oh, this isn't, how I thought it would be." But then then after multiple listens, like, um, I started to understand your choices
Mm,
a lot better. They made more sense, and basically, I just had all this legacy luggage,
sure,
that the reader isn't gonna have, that the listener isn't gonna have, that it was just
sure.
in my head, that meant nothing, because, it was just, you know the it's you there really was no reason for it, because, other than, "Oh, that's how I heard it initially."
Mm,
And, same thing with with music. Oftentimes you just get, on a demo, you might get like really attached to like a certain line, a certain guitar
right.
line, a certain keyboard line, and it might just by simply because it was in there early, and so it kind of gets this legacy pass.
Right.
And you should always be questioning those. It's like, why, really, why? What's this serving? What's the function here?
In terms of that stage of the process, because one of the things that I've started to introduce in books that I'm producing directly with authors, and sometimes through publishers as well, if that impulse from authors to have a specific voice in mind or a specific character direction, one of the things that I've started to introduced there is asking if it was to be cast as a movie, if there were specific roles or actors that they would slot into specific characters. Do you think that that is a good thing to offer up, or is that just complicating things or something else?
No, for you, I think it's a good idea because I feel like you're very good at, like, dialing up something.
Mm,
Um, whereas and I'm not sure that would be, like, advice for everybody. Um,
sure, fair.
I guess the advice for everyone that I would give is because the author and this is for narrators, I guess I'm speaking to, because the author is so emotionally invested in it, like, they
Mhm,
spent whatever, 1 year, 5 years, maybe longer on it.
mhm,
They've got a lot, emotionally riding on it,
right,
that it's kind of, I think you do wanna get, I love it's always kind of like, this kind of romantic thing where, "Oh, we're not gonna do contracts. We trust each
yeah,
other.
yeah.
Let's let it let's let it
Let's
ride."
let it ride.
Yeah, yeah. No, because it's uncomfortable to say, "Oh, sign this," and, like, it's like it's saying it's implicitly saying, "I don't trust you,"
Right.
and that's tough.
Well, I agree because I do have that sort of itch whenever I'm like, "And here's a contract for us to work under." But
It's a buzzkill, isn't it?
a little bit, but I think it's important because contract is one word, but you can also use the word agreement, and that's much more mutual, and I think a important thing because I have that same impulse, and, I think it's important to remember that as an author entering into agreement and the narrator, both of you are mutually protecting your work and your time and your investment in this thing to where if one end of the deal even if one end of the deal isn't up to it just starts going somewhere where you weren't expecting and you don't want to follow through, which I would encourage to like, communicate about it before you pull the ripcord, but it's protecting both ends of the thing because for both people, it's a tremendous investment. Like you're saying, authors, 1 year, 5 years more invested into this thing, lots of themselves in it. And for for narrators, it's just a tremendous time investment. One book can be 2 to 3 weeks if you're a like seasoned narrator, depending on your recording schedule and stuff. So I think the mutualness of that is just important and helpful in a way.
Yeah. Well, and the guideline that I give, I mean, I think for everyone, um, narrator wise, is spell it, do a sample chapter that has as many of the characters in it as
Right,
because I feel like that's a lot of where the author gets hung up on. Oh, it's this voice isn't right. It's not because
right,
again, if they're attached to the work, they're really attached to the characters.
right.
Like, like, a part of them in some cases and stuff, or, like, they're just really, and so if it's, like, dramatically kind of dissonant or discordant or, like, there's a gap between,
Mhm.
their expectation and stuff, like, I think that's something that they really could get hung up on, and, so I guess, spelling out there's gonna be, like, a chapter or a sample,
Yeah,
and trying to get as many characters in as possible, but also, you're not gonna be able to get every character in it, though, and so I think this is, like,
totally.
to protect the narrator, you've got I mean, you've gotta, like, specify how many and I think that's something you're pretty good about. You're,
Yeah,
kinda setting those expectations and stuff, but
yeah.
they need to be set, and it's because there's gonna be the temptation on the author to, like, get you to
Right,
re-record a bunch of stuff,
right,
not for a good reason, just because it doesn't match, you know, what's in their head necessarily,
right.
and so I think it's really I feel like that because it's such a, yeah, personal, emotional thing that's really a good place for a contract to be pretty,
Mhm.
to have the guideposts in to kind of guide both parties through it in a
Yeah,
way that's going to be equitable.
yeah. Couldn't agree more. In terms of characters, I also because I personally, due to just like the number of books that I have in my like production pipeline, typically at this point in my career, at least, I don't have the time to read the book in full before I make the agreement. So
Oh, right, right.
usually, what I in terms of because I totally agree that that sample of character voices is really, really important if it's important to the author, is either asking which characters are valuable to the author to have really locked in and, signed off on, and then ask for, like, passages, like, if there are certain passages that you really wanna make sure are locked on, like, if there's a penultimate scene where Darth Vader says, "I am your father," and you really wanna make sure that I'm doing it right, we can definitely loop that into this sample. But yeah, I think that that's definitely a really important thing to cover together. Um,
Well, and then that's another thing too, where, like, I think it's important to, I guess, when we're talking about comfort and stuff, you know,
mhm,
the, because there isn't, like, a whole lot like, a narrator might have, like, just a few samples and stuff, so there's not
right,
a lot to go on. You're still having
right,
to
right,
imagine a lot. You're still having to fill in a lot of gaps. And that just means every little piece of material that's in your portfolio that's available,
mhm,
or in your, kind of written correspondence, is going to be like read into. Um,
sure,
and so, it's like, because, just given the fact that that's all that's there. Um,
mhm, mhm,
and so, just, this goes for like everything, just, being able to communicate, kind of just, you know, clearly and well, and kind of, especially if the author's new to it, but just kind of like
totally,
being able to kind of level set and, get them comfortable too. Because if they're comfortable, then all of a sudden, I think they're going to trust you
yeah,
a lot
I
more.
agree, I agree. Do you listen to audiobooks?
Oh yeah, all the time.
What are you listening to anything right now?
Yeah. What am I listening to? Yeah, I have to like let me check my.
Check away, my friend.
What am I-
I wish I listened to more, but, it's kinda like don't bring your work home a little bit for me where
Oh
I
yeah,
I don't have the extra bandwidth for it,
right.
um, but I should probably dive into it a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'm like, it's like it's just a bunch of stuff. I have like 6 or 7 going at the same time.
Same. My bedside
Um,
table is literally just a stack of books.
yeah, no, like I like to, I always like to have a history going on. I'm doing Christendom by Peter Heather.
Mm,
Doing robotics, great courses just for research.
rock on.
Um, for a future book, Play Nice. It's the book about Blizzard. Kind of also research
Blizzard, the game company?
the game company, kind of like a history of the company.
Gotcha.
And then a criminology for dummies book. For more research. So a lot of it's I try to, have some fiction, have some like just I love history, just kind of
Sure,
and then have research. Everything's kind of going, just
sure.
being able to dip into those, dip in and out, but like
That's all at once interesting to me, that you well, just given the books that we've done together, 'cause it makes so much sense that you would be into history because the books that's one of the things that I really enjoy about, the books of yours that I've read is, like I was saying earlier, that expansive world. It's clear that there was a, like, on-ramp to the story where it starts, and there's a history to it. And like a lot of great science fiction too, it's not, like, shoehorned in where it's like and this corporation was the beginning of the end, and it's like fed in at the end, but it's like infused into everything where like in Forever X2, the thing that I really loved about Forever X2, I can't remember if I told you this, but the fact that quick plot synopsis to set it up for folks because it's important, but there's like the real world, which is essentially our world, but near future. And correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but our world, near future, and effectively there are esports, sort of Twitch streamers, and they get looped into this sort of virtual reality Matrix-esque type gaming competition where they get jacked into a specific game a la like Fortnite or Apex Legends or something like that. Very cyberpunk-esque. I don't know if you ever played that game. But the fact that there was the top world and then the like virtual world, and both of them had their separate, really deep, rich histories, because I remember them both very separately. And I have to remind myself that they're in the same book, because in the Forever X2 virtual world, I remember when I mean, just the like economic system within it. I just loved it. Because I'm thinking of a specific moment where they go to the I can't remember if it's called the red light district, but effectively it's the red light district.
Oh yeah, what is that? What is that called? Yeah, I can't. As soon as the book's done, like forget everything. I
Same.
have the memory of a gold.
But that area in particular sticks out in my mind right now, at least. But as I remember it, it like expands into all the different areas. Um, but yeah, really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you want to make the setting a character. Um,
Totally.
you want to. We are talking before about casting a spell and immersion, and it's your voice. It's also being able to like imagine what things feel like, what how the light, like this
Yeah.
whole uh everything sensory. You got to make it as easier um for the person to imagine being there as possible, because if you do that, then all like the plot and character stuff is gonna hit that much more because
Hmm.
they're receptive at that point. They're in it.
Right.
You've broken down that barrier, and that was I really appreciate you saying that thing earlier about how it's the reader is a participant too,
Hmm.
because that's so true, and that's kind of like one of the things that's so sad about today is that smartphones and stuff,
Yeah.
they rob that from people.
Yeah. Which
Uh,
then goes to Drive A, like
yeah.
direct segue, if that's a segue. But yeah, the concept of that one strikes me as probably your most well. I don't even think I need to say probably of the ones that we've done together. That one's the most dystopian, I think, in many respects. I mean, if you wanted to go in terms of like, we could be here in like 3 years where we're getting pop-up ads right here. Everybody's augmenting things. I mean, Elon Musk running the government right now seems like a direct, like, through line almost.
Yeah, well, it's funny, it's interesting because like, I think one of the things that you do as an author, I like to do anyway,
Mhm,
is, for sci-fi especially, is take something that is, happening now,
mhm.
then just, like and then just transport it to a different place, a different world, and dial it up to like
Yeah,
11,
yeah.
right? And then you could you look at it in that world and be like, oh, that's crazy that they're doing that, you know. But then it's like, oh, we're not really doing
But not really.
much different. Um, and yeah, it's like I always kind of like I've always kind of felt that I was like a Cassandra in some respects,
Right.
being able to like see it, sometimes being able to see around corners and have like a good intuitive sense of where this is going to go.
Mm.
And some of that is, yeah, reading a lot of history, having a lot of kind of just seeing patterns in time and stuff, and seeing patterns with people. It's a little trickier now because we're kind of in uncharted waters.
Right.
But I think that's like I kind of thought, that's my role is like, hey guys, I think we should be. What do you think? um, and but at the same time, I think I'm like a fundamentally optimistic person.
Sure.
I'm not like, a doomer looking for trouble, like looking to like, oh yeah, this is everything's going to, constantly thinking, things.
Yeah, I I agree in your self-assessment, both in terms of having conversations with you, but also in terms of your books, because while they do have, uh they're never, like, dystopian for dystopian's sake, like, there's the very much the like you're saying, if we take what's happening now and you look around the corner and just dial it up and expand it to the nth degree or whatever, there's still the tensions that we would feel today in terms of the pull and push between, the good, the positive, the optimistic, and their inverse in many respects, and that definitely, vibes, I think.
Yeah, and I don't think too, that you wanna go into a book as an author of saying, I think you write because you're trying to figure it out. You're trying to figure something out.
Right.
If you already, knew the answer, like, um yeah, I mean, I just don't for one, I'm just, like, less interested in trying to be, like, didactic or moralizing, like, in a Samuel Richardson
Totally.
type sense, because, like, I guess the thing that makes me wanna write is where I don't know,
Mhm.
and I'm trying to figure it out, and,
In terms of the, like, not necessarily plotting as in the plot of your stories, but in terms of your planning or structuring of the books, uh, because I like Stephen King being pretty transparent about his writing process where he kinda just starts with an idea and cruises, which is kind of why I would assume many of his books kinda just end up ending at a certain point. Um, do you have a process for that? Like, in terms of your research as well, do you kinda just research whatever is piquing your interest and, if it loops in, or do you hit a point in your book where you're like, "Oh, robotics, I wanna check this out a little bit more, get a little bit deeper here," and then go seek out material?
yeah, no, it's both at the same time. It's like,
Gotcha.
I think you only can, like, maybe have, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7 good hours a day, if that, to write, and so I think you always wanna be writing because 'cause you'll never get those back, right?
Mm,
If you spend it all on research, it's not like you could dip back into that bank and be like, "Well, I'm gonna write 18 hours today," or
right.
whatever. That's just probably not gonna happen, so I always wanna be writing, um, but then if I'm at an impasse, like, I really just have to know this thing, I have to know, about just the mechanics of this thing, and then I will stop and I will, but I always, but then I might just go to a different part of the book
Mm,
and keep writing, or I might go back and start revising and make a scene as perfect as I can, um, and,
gotcha.
because okay, like, I think though it's really important though, to try to, like, know as much about the world as you possibly can,
Sure.
because your characters are never gonna be, they're never gonna know more than you
Mm,
about stuff. Um, they're kind of, in a way, they are contained, inside you, and like, emotionally, spiritually, they can be, more infinite, more different, but, like, in order like, you have to sell that they have this skill or they have this competency, and that has to be on the page, and then the reader can maybe read into that, but you have to plant that seed, and so
Right.
you have to know stuff, and so that's why I think it's so research is so important. You have to have dots in order to connect them.
Mm. It's interesting because in my acting training, because when I went to NYU for my MFA, that program and the teachers that I had at the time, there's been a bit of shifting since I was there, but I think that their pedagogy is largely the same. Their focus for the actor was very much in line with that, where if, for example, this was one of my great mistakes in my training program. Uh, I was in a play where I had to put on a record player, but I had the order of mechanisms wrong, and so I put the needle on and then turned the record on. And my one of my teachers was like, "You idiot." He wasn't that harsh, but he was like it busted the immersion immediately because your character is supposed to be this music buff who ingests music like a crazy person, and that simple mechanism of you putting down the needle and then turning on the record player tells me immediately that you don't know what you're doing. And to be fair, I had always done it that way and nobody had corrected me. So I was like, well, okay, this isn't all on me. This is the world never instructing me properly. I'm not going to research something I've done before. But it's interesting in terms of both the writing process and in terms of the narration of a book, because it's so interesting to me coming from an acting perspective where you actually have time to prepare stuff in many respects. Like if you get a film role, you've got a while to research things, but you don't really need to have it's a really interesting thing there. But like theater, you've got months of rehearsal where you can really dig into something. And audiobooks kind of rest somewhere in the middle, but because it's simply audio, there's a little bit of a relaxing there where, like, I don't need to necessarily understand, um, to use an example from like voiceover stuff. If I'm doing a corporate narration or something for a company that does like, uh nano chip technology and I'm having to like describe semiconductors and transducers in a really highly articulate manner. I'm never going to research or know that. I shouldn't say never, but chances are I just have to sound like I know what I'm talking about rather than actually knowing. And I don't know that that's, I mean, for that kind of thing, sure. But in terms of book narration, I guess it just goes back to my initial thought that I don't really need to know full stop what's happening necessarily. I just need to invest in it as if I do, which is part of the magic of the thing. And then if, of course, you can figure it out, it's a really, really beautiful thing where if I can say, uh, I don't know, like we were talking about with Forever X2, if I inhabit the red light district by going down there and I can see in my mind the thing, and even if I don't understand the mechanisms of the shoot, what's it called? Hydroponics facility. If I don't understand how that works, uh, I can still act or perform as that scientist who knows how the hydroponics facility works, in a way.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going at with that, but
Oh,
it's
no,
just a really interesting sort of pivot between disciplines, I think.
yeah, because I think, like, I couldn't get away with that, as much, like,
Right.
if you don't know, I mean, you can kind of, cheat it a little bit in the sense that you don't write a detailed description like that, you just leave, some negative space. Um,
But then you run the risk of the needle on the record player moment where you describe something that it doesn't sit. And granted, there may be one person who reads the book who actually knows how the systems work, but
right. Yeah, no,
you ac
I I think I read somewhere that, or some person's advice was as long as you know more than like 90% of people, then,
yeah.
I don't that to me that's a little lazy. Like, I wanna know, you know, 97 or something. You know, because people, I think you do get a little latitude in fiction,
Mhm.
right? You know, people are more forgiving certainly than nonfiction, where the whole raison d'etre is to, like, be right
Right.
about something specifically. But again, I think it's really important, at least to me, to create a sense of verisimilitude
Mhm.
in it, because again, that transports it makes it easier. If people,
Right.
that you know what you're talking about, it's easier to invest. It's easier for to kind of click your heels. Um, and two, just like selfishly, I want to learn more myself.
I don't know that that's selfish.
Yeah, well, I mean, kind of the coolest thing about writing is like you're learning the whole time you go. All the
Mhm.
research is accumulating. You're just becoming that much more knowledgeable about the world and like different, way people can interact and live together and stuff. And that's to me like that's one of like my favorite things is just constantly like being, just being able to seep myself in just kind of a information flow
Mhm.
and have it actually be, work related too. Um, it's
That's
lucky.
one of the things that I've found as I have lived more years in this world. Um, I get really excited by the idea. Uh, this sort of stems from arts in general, but I think it translates to everything else. That every person seeks out the thing that they can understand and communicate about their perception of an experience in the world best. So for me, that's always been performance in some respect. And I would guess that for you, that's writing in many ways. And I love how, because as I've learned more about my own discipline, there are moments when other people who are really good in their own respective disciplines talk about the way that they think about things. And the cross section between the two, it's almost like a one-to-one map, and it really seems like it's like just a fundamental way of communicating, but we just use different languages. Like, if you listen to scientists talk about stuff and the way that they are distilling down the world into smaller and smaller components in many respects, it's really exciting to just vibe out on that in general, and then musicians in general. And 2, how rewarding it is, I feel, at least for me personally, to learn from those different disciplines, sort of like what I think you're saying in terms of immerse yourself into the flow of, information and experience. Um, it helps me to see my own things in greater relief because 'cause I've seen someone else's really articulate perspective
Yeah.
in that way.
Yeah, no, totally. That's exactly like because you when you see someone else do something that's like similar but not quite, then yeah, like the relief and contrast, it makes you see your own process kind of in a new light
Mm.
too.
I was also curious, this is sort of tangential, but, and if you're interested in talking about it, if not, no worries, but, because my decision to go back to get a master's in acting
Yeah.
it felt like the right thing for me, but anyway, I don't wanna plant anything in your mind in terms of my experience necessarily, but was there a reasoning to why you're going back now or looking to?
But Jay, I can actually blame you for this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. No, because it was having you bring those characters to life in, the books that
No
was
way.
it
Okay.
was electric. No, I'm serious. No smoke. It was electrifying, um, because you made some, like, really bold choices, and you went for it, and, yeah, things I never again, this is why authors should give the narrators plenty of rope. This is their expertise. This is their craft. Um, if you choose the right one, they're going to do amazing things with your work and take it in different directions that you would never have thought of. And so, and when you did that for the books, it was like it was energizing, and it was like, well, geez, like what would it be like to have him like actually be like acted out, um, on screen or something, and then
Mm,
kind of like started going down a screenwriting rabbit hole, which was really, I mean, because it's its own separate craft
mm,
where yeah, and but it was just really fun, just like everything is needs to be in this visual language. Um, and one of my favorite things about writing is I love writing in first person POV. I love kind of like really you know getting the thoughts of the character, and so that you
yeah.
kind of throw it away and you just kind of have to figure out in screenwriting is kind of having to get the essence, to get the essence of those thoughts, but communicate it visually on the script. Um,
Mm,
so it's this whole different thing, and just because I felt like I was just so, this is like a nascent thing for me, um, where I was kind of like, starting a little bit, it felt like maybe, oh, this is maybe something I could go do a master's program for,
mm,
because like I'm new at it. I feel like because I'd be so receptive because I'm so new, I can just be
right.
like sponge and like just begin for me. I like learning like different modalities of learning. I love reading a big stack of books. I love talking to people, getting direct experience, but I also like the classroom. It's I got a lot out of college just because, like in history courses, like
Mhm,
some of the primary sources you're not going to read,
right.
just on your own, and you're not going to have like the kind of context and the kind of the expertise of the professor as a guide to help take you through it, and everything has more resonance when it's placed into context,
Mhm,
and then kind of starting there, and then like if I take a and that allows you then to go read primary sources on your own once you kind of feel like you have that base. But no, I think like in-person instruction is like it's super sticky,
mm,
because there's like a tactile, you know I guess too, like emotional resonance, just being in the room with people, that that's why I get a little bit like I'm sure that there's going to be advances in education, with like AI tutoring and
right.
stuff like that. And certainly there was like a big push to do like online learning online. But I think it's and some people, I think that's great for some people, but I think a lot of the people who are like really championing this were like total autodidacts
Mm,
that had a bad experience in school, um,
mm,
because they were way ahead of everyone else, and they were just super bored and didn't vibe with their peers and stuff. And you know, but I don't think that's like the mean um experience for people, and I think it's like there is something about learning, with other people,
yeah,
together, and being in the same, physical proximate space, that it's just a different, it might be the difference between just reading something on a page and just having it completely fly out your,
right,
whatever, and then having it stick or not.
right.
And I think probably the answer is going to be, it should be different for different for each people. Like, I think there are certain like gifted students who've been like totally underserved,
Mhm,
by the program and stuff. And then I think it's just going to be like matching, students with like the way they learn best. So I have no idea if this is a good this master's program is a good idea or not, but I'm taking the leap.
one does not know until one is I mean, I had a good time,
Yeah,
and
no,
the thing that I found for myself, at least in terms of the experience, all of the things you described where uh, learning in community was so valuable because in acting, at least, you only have so much time where you're on stage. So
Yeah.
if you're in a group with a number of people, the majority of your time is spent watching other folks do their thing. And I found that to be so valuable because you got to watch other people grapple with both themselves, but also with all of the new mechanisms and tools that you yourself were learning. And as they either succeeded or struggled with or just ignored various things,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, that was often the best learning that took place, 'cause and also just in terms of, like, time ratio. It's what I spent my most of my time doing, so that was pretty you gotta find valuable value in it
Yeah,
in a
no,
way.
and you can be inspired by your peers too.
Mhm.
If someone, like, really brings it, I'm sure that's like, oh, it
You get
hit.
pumped.
Yeah, yeah, you get pumped yeah, there's a certain there was a reason, like, different places like Athens, when there's a community
Yeah,
of scholars or like Florence, in time to time, but it does take like kind of like a critical mass, and definitely people feed off each other.
yeah. My brain stalled out hard.
It's good that you're in control of the editing.
It
Um,
is, it is.
that's a crazy thing, Jay, that like that like for some quirk of whatever, narrators are expected to be this jack of all trades. I guess it's a little, more the case with actors right now having to like, self-produce their own self-tape and stuff as that's become the more. But like, I feel like what happened that made the expectation be that this like a vocal talent is like a great editor, great sound
Yeah.
designer, great like what? Do you know like how that kind of just shook out or?
From what I understand, um, I mean, it's kind of all of it, but the story of audiobooks from start to finish, it's it used to be that you would go into a studio, you would have an engineer with you, and almost all of the books were produced directly from publishers. And then with the advent of ACX and other self-publishing outlets, it, on the one hand, gave narrators a way into the industry, which before wasn't really accessible. Um, and all of this was before my time, but and I think now, honestly, a lot of it feels like a race to the bottom in terms of just profit, more or less, because there are companies exploring like I think ACX and Audible have authorized the use of AI audiobooks, which to me just sounds like a terrible idea. Not necessarily, I mean, from the perspective of a narrator, of course, but also it's my anyway, to not get too far from the question, I think it is just a race to the bottom where if the way into the industry is you have to self-produce your first several audiobooks as a narrator just to have like proof of concept. And there are people that I know and have worked with that have found ways in without going that route, but that number becomes less and less day by day, partly because the market's just so saturated at this point, with the pandemic and everything. Everybody got a microphone and went into their closet to start narrating audiobooks.
Were you ahead of that or?
No, I was along with that wave. I graduated from my MFA program into the pandemic,
Oh,
so it was great. It was great. The entire entertainment industry was shuttered and dead. Nobody wanted to hear anything from me. And it was kind of a sink or swim moment where it was like, okay, I've got student debt, I've got an acting degree, nowhere to act. How do I make this work? And we kind of just did. And part of that for me, into your question about why do you have to be a one-stop shop, in terms of my like building my business, it took me a while to figure out that I was a business in and of myself, but um I essentially started to like map out all of the potential points of friction that someone could potentially say, we'd love to hire him, but, and I tried to remove as many of those buts as I could. And one of them was learning how to do audio production to a reasonably high degree. Um, so that was my journey, but it was not necessarily by choice. It was more or less an industry thing. But back to the AI thing before I get too far away from that thought chain. The thing that I find about that deal, aside from it just being profit over people at face value, there are elements, and I've talked about this a couple times, where I feel like there are some applications of an AI voice that are acceptable, like accessibility, and voice assistance. I don't really see that being anything else other than an AI voice just because it has to have the flexibility. But to use an AI voice for an audiobook, it feels on the one hand insulting to your listener, where you're like, I don't have the time to have this be, because we've been talking so much about connection and the value of it. And that's part of the huge thing. It's the human voice. It is how we, and this is another thing that I love in terms of the human voice is, A, this process is crazy that we're going through this like computer system to communicate. But if you break down the mechanisms of what communication is, I breathe in air, which not only gives me life, but then I exhale air. My brain transmits signals to my vocal cords to pull them at various frequencies, which then sends like shockwaves through molecules in the air, hit your eardrums, which then transmit into your brain. Like it's insane. And the fact that that's connected to a soul and my history and all of that stuff and your history. And to cut that out for just cost efficiency and time efficiency is immeasurably tragic. And that I'm not saying that from the perspective of a voiceover artist, though I do feel that probably more so than other folks, but it's just the human voice is such a powerful thing to connect. Why would we eliminate that?
Ever since Homer.
Ever since Homer.
Yeah, no, I think that another part of the tragedy too is like I always felt like, like the best version of AI where it's would be, an extension of us, letting us do things that
Yeah.
humans that we couldn't do on our own already, but where kind of it started, disrupting the most is the stuff that we we love to do.
Yeah.
We're already doing it and finding so much meaning out of, and that's the stuff that's getting automated away, at least first, which seems like really kind of perverse and unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because I don't think anyone like necessarily asked for this or wanted it. And I, kind of like, eating our own seed stock is like, this stuff gets trained on, actors and performers and stuff, and then they're being automated away. It's like, ugh. Uh, it's kind of like it is, it is, it is really tragic. I mean, and that's one of the reasons I like to write is
Mm.
because, we never, again, I don't think anyone like necessarily wanted it to go like this or chose it like this. But yet so much of what happens in the world is just inertia. It's
Mm.
just path of least resistance. It's what the tech, where the technology like leads us down.
Mhm.
Because it has, the technology will favor like a certain track, right? And it'll lock you in once you kind of get on those standards and
Right.
stuff. And so you kind of have to be, vigilant and have some foresight because you're on this decision tree. You might be like, you might get very far away from where you initially wanted to go based on being kind of locked into these choices. And we're on this tech tree now, and so we're now in this world, and we don't necessarily know how to get back to that other one, or
Mhm.
kind of being able to, you know, unwind the ball of yarn. And I think literature, like at its best, right, is trying to like make this like world of abstraction just a little bit more legible and inviting people to think about this stuff, before it actually. That's why I like sci-fi. You know,
Mm.
let's think about this thing before it actually happens, and so we have some kind of like intuitions and ideas about how we're best going to handle it instead of like winging it, once it does actually happen, right? um and that is yeah, that's what what drew me to it. But it's, it's tough because like, because there's such a strong deterministic um element to technology.
Mhm.
It has such strong um pulls in certain directions. It takes a lot for people to be able to like resist that and
Mm.
like, oh, to be like, oh, we're gonna forego all kind of this low hanging fruit and this like
Right.
opportunity for huge windfall profits because we know we're like picking up pennies in front of a bulldozer or whatever.
Right.
We're gonna do this other thing. That takes a lot of like coordination and will and care, and it's not always easy. Especially like, I try not to like, I don't like to shit on capitalism too much because I don't know that there's like a necessarily like a perfect way to coordinate 8 billion people, you know. But
If you come up with something, let me know.
yeah, 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 I'll keep you. Yeah. Um, but it does make it really hard incentive wise to like be able to like buck the trend and be like, no, I'm not gonna make all this money. I'm gonna like,
Right.
work. Um, and so uh it's tricky. It's a coordination problem. But I think it would be like, dignified of us as humans to like try, at
Yeah.
least try to get it right. I mean, that's another like thing why I like writing. It's like, oh, you mentioned before, like a lot of my books are kind of like, dystopian esque settings, and some of the characters are kind of, you know they're different, but like one common thread is like they're trying.
That's yeah, I was about to say, the mechanisms you described and the, like, pull towards dignity is definitely a thread in yours. I don't know if that's how you would articulate it necessarily, but they
Sure.
are trying for sure. Yeah. Um, well, my friend, I don't wanna take up too much of your time, but thank you so much for chatting. This was lovely.
It's been great. Thanks for having me on. And I love what you're doing with the channel. I'm not even a narrator, but I find myself
Well, it's good to know it has broader appeal than just our booth community. And in terms of, books to look out for now in the future, you got anything cooking to keep an eye out down the line or other
uh,
books?
yeah, and I got well, let's say this, like, you'll know first because doing like the sequel to Lakes of Mars.
Right.
And yeah, no, at first it's like, uh, it took me a while to kind of crack that. But as it is, it has a like a different POV character.
Mm,
And so like, so at first I was like, well, I needed to, as much as I love Jay, it would be more like it would be maybe jarring to have, him being voicing like the I character and I,
Mhm.
you know, but then, when I thought about it more, it's like there's so many characters that you voiced in Mars that are so specific now,
Right.
you know,
Right.
there'd be no way to do it without you.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm sure somebody else out there could handle it if you wish, though.
No.
Um, cool. Well, again, everybody, Drive A, Forever X2, Lakes of Mars. They are fantastic and not blowing smoke. Some of the favorite books that I've narrated. And of course, Merritt here is fantastic. Thanks again, Merritt. And I'll hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. You take care.
There you go. Merritt's just such a cool guy. Thanks again to Merritt for talking through this with me. Let me know if you have any questions about this, if you'd like to see more of this kind of thing here. And if you have additional questions for Merritt or myself about the process of collaboration, these specific books, and of course, if you want to check the books out down below, feel free to do so. Until the next one of these, be well, everybody, and I'll see you there. Toodles.